Shoot is just an incredible story. They become the very definition of public enemy.
Time slows down when bullets fly. On a quiet January morning in 1935, federal agents surrounded a suspected hideout of the ruthless and heavily armed Barker-Karpis gang in Florida. What unfolded became one of the most sensational and prolonged gunfights of the entire gangster era.
The queen of the mobsters, this idea of a Tommy gun-toting grandmother, really solidified in the public's mind this notion that this was a sort of a monstrous person. We're talking about Bloody Mama.
The Barker-Karpis gang had risen to national infamy during the darkest years of the Great Depression. The group formed in 1931 inside the Kansas State Penitentiary, when Fred Barker met fellow career criminal Alvin "Creepy" Karpis. Together, they built a criminal network that specialized in violent bank robberies and high-profile kidnappings. Their bold crimes quickly placed them at the top of law enforcement's most wanted list, earning the designation of Public Enemy #1 under the intense scrutiny of J. Edgar Hoover's Bureau of Investigation.
Prepares what can only be called a siege of the Barker place.
By early 1935, the gang's activities had drawn relentless pursuit. A hand-drawn map discovered among the possessions of gang member Arthur "Doc" Barker pointed federal agents toward a modest vacation house on the shores of Lake Weir in Central Florida. Special Agent E.J. Connolly led a team of 13 agents who quietly positioned themselves around the property on the morning of January 16th. They believed key members of the gang, possibly the entire group, were sheltering inside the unassuming two-story frame house. The Barker-Karpis gang represented the violent underbelly of Depression-era crime. Spanning more than 20 associates at its peak, the syndicate became one of the most feared operations involved in bank robberies and kidnappings across the Midwest. Fred Barker, the youngest son of the family, stood at the center of many field operations alongside the cunning Alvin Karpis. Karpis earned a reputation as one of the most intelligent criminals of the period, which only made the gang more dangerous and harder to capture. The public image of the gang often centered on the striking figure of Kate Ma Barker, portrayed in the press and later in popular culture as a ruthless criminal matriarch.
They come with a lot of firepower.
This idea of a Tommy gun-toting grandmother helped solidify the notion of a monstrous family enterprise. Hollywood would later dramatize her as Bloody Mama in films that emphasized her alleged role as the queen of the mobsters. In reality, the full truth about her involvement remained far more complicated and would spark debate for decades after the events at Lake Weir. Agent Connolly and his team prepared for a potential siege. They arrived with significant firepower, expecting resistance from a heavily armed group. The agents took up positions behind 2 parked cars and several large trees scattered across the front and west side of the house. Uncertainty hung over the operation. The exact number of people inside remained unknown, and the variety of weapons the gang might possess added to the tension. The plan called for an all-out offensive to bring the wanted criminals to justice, dead or alive if necessary. The initial moments around the house passed in heavy silence. Agents demanded surrender, but no response came from within.
Find what being a gangster is all about.
After a calculated wait, tear gas grenades were fired toward the windows in an attempt to force the occupants out. Almost immediately, heavy machine gun fire erupted from the upstairs windows. The battle had begun. Inside the house, Fred Barker responded with ferocious determination. He moved rapidly from window to window, firing bursts from multiple weapons to create the illusion of a much larger force defending the property. The distinctive sound of the Thompson submachine gun, known as the Tommy gun, dominated the early exchange. This weapon had become the signature firearm of gangsters during the Prohibition and Depression eras. Its high rate of fire and psychological impact made it a feared tool in criminal hands. Ballistic analysis of the Thompson submachine gun reveals its impressive capabilities and limitations. The weapon could discharge approximately 800 rounds per minute. Its heavy weight of just over 10 pounds helped manage recoil, allowing for controlled bursts even at high speeds. However, the .45 caliber bullets it fired traveled at relatively low velocity compared to rifle rounds. When tested against dense wooden tree trunks of the type used for cover by the agents, the Tommy gun rounds often failed to penetrate fully. The wood absorbed much of the impact, leaving agents behind such cover relatively protected despite the noise and flying bark. As the firefight intensified, one agent attempted to advance closer to the house, but quickly found himself pinned down behind a tree. Bullets struck the trunk repeatedly, sending splinters and bark flying. The gunman upstairs had a clear line of sight, yet the tree provided enough protection to prevent a direct hit. Meanwhile, Agent Connolly carefully observed the pattern of fire. He counted shots, tracked trajectories, and tried to pinpoint the exact locations of the shooters. The volume and movement of fire suggested possibly multiple gunmen, but the pattern also hinted that the defense might be the work of just one highly active individual. Connolly raised his .3006 Springfield rifle and fired a single, well-aimed shot toward the front of the house. The round struck Fred Barker in the shoulder, passing through his chest but narrowly missing vital organs. The wound was serious but not immediately fatal. For a moment, the volume of fire from the house decreased. The pinned agent seized the opportunity to retreat to safer cover behind the vehicles. Fred Barker, despite his injury, soon resumed firing with renewed intensity. He continued moving between windows and switching weapons, determined to hold off the surrounding agents. The agents, for their part, maintained steady suppressing fire while trying to conserve ammunition. The exchange dragged on for hours. Hundreds of rounds were fired in both directions. The walls of the house offered limited protection against high-powered rifle rounds, and bullet holes began to accumulate across the structure. The Barker-Karpis gang's criminal career had been marked by a string of increasingly bold and violent acts that terrorized the Midwest. After forming in prison, Fred Barker and Alvin Karpis began with bank robberies that often turned deadly. They killed the sheriff during one early escape and later expanded into kidnappings that captured national attention. In 1933, they abducted William Ham Jr., a wealthy brewery executive, securing a ransom of over $100,000. The following year, they targeted Edward Bremer, a prominent banker, netting an even larger $200,000. These high-profile crimes, combined with multiple murders and armed robberies, made them a top priority for federal authorities. The gang operated with a loose network of up to 25 members, moving frequently between hideouts in Minnesota, Missouri, and other states to evade capture. Ma Barker traveled with her sons, providing logistical support and a veneer of family normalcy, though historical accounts differ sharply on whether she directed operations or simply followed along. Fred, known for his volatile temper, and Karpis, the strategic planner, formed the core leadership. The other Barker brothers, Herman, Lloyd, and Arthur Dock, had varying levels of involvement, with some already imprisoned or deceased by 1935. The gang's relocation to the quiet shores of Lake Weir was intended as a temporary respite. They rented the modest two-story house under false names, blending into the small community of Ocklawaha. Locals initially saw them as friendly vacationers who tipped generously at local spots. But Fred's reckless behavior, including firing a machine gun at ducks on the lake and expressing interest in hunting a legendary local alligator, eventually raised suspicions. The house itself sat on a peaceful lakeside lot, surrounded by trees and open ground that now became the battlefield. Its wooden construction and upstairs windows gave defenders elevated firing positions, while the surrounding vegetation offered partial cover for the agents. This setting turned a tranquil vacation spot into one of the most intense confrontations in early FBI history. Estimates suggest that between 950 and 1,500 rounds, or even as many as 2,000 in some accounts, were exchanged during the siege, making it the longest recorded gun battle in the Bureau's history at the time. The slow, sporadic nature of the shooting reflected both sides' caution and the need to conserve limited ammunition supplies. As the siege stretched into the afternoon, Agent Connolly grew concerned about the length of the operation. The possibility remained that other gang members, including Alvin Karpis and additional associates, might return and launch a counter-ambush. ammunition levels were dropping dangerously low. To replenish supplies, a rookie agent was ordered to make a risky dash across open ground to a second vehicle parked farther back. The young agent sprinted forward under the cover of continued suppressing fire from his colleagues. Strangely, no shots came from the house during this exposed run. An eerie silence gradually settled over the property. After more than 3 hours of near-constant gunfire, with well over 1,000 rounds already exchanged, the defenders had gone quiet. Agents could not determine whether the occupants were dead, wounded, or simply conserving ammunition for a final ambush. A local caretaker named Willie Woodbury happened to approach the scene. Recognizing his familiarity with the property and its owners, Agent Connolly instructed him to enter the house and report back on what he found inside. Woodbury cautiously moved forward and disappeared through the front door. For several tense minutes, complete silence reigned. Then, from an upstairs window, his voice called out with the news that 2 bodies lay inside. Upon entering the southwest corner bedroom on the 2nd floor, Woodbury discovered Fred Barker and his mother, 62-year-old Kate Ma Barker. Fred had been struck by 7 bullets in total, including 2 fatal head wounds. A Tommy gun lay just out of his reach. Ma Barker had been killed by a single gunshot wound to the head. The agents later recovered a large quantity of weapons from the house, including machine guns, rifles, and pistols, along with a significant sum of cash. In the official account promoted by J. Edgar Hoover and the Bureau, Ma Barker was found with a Tommy gun in her hands, reinforcing the image of her as an active participant in the gunfight. This detail, however, faced immediate dispute. Some contemporary reports and later historical analysis suggested she may not have fired any shots at all. The sheer number of bullet holes in the walls indicated that agents had poured hundreds of rounds into the house during the final stages of the siege, particularly when providing cover for the tear gas attempt. Prior to the events at Lake Weir, Ma Barker had no criminal record. She had never been charged with any crime. Those who knew her personally described her as a devoted mother from the Ozarks, who followed her sons from place to place but took no active role in planning or executing robberies or kidnappings. Barker-Karpis himself later insisted that Ma played no leadership part in the gang's operations. According to accounts from gang members, she was often sent to the movies whenever serious criminal planning took place. She was viewed by many as a simple, superstitious woman who enjoyed the benefits of her son's criminal lifestyle, but lacked the inclination or ability to organize crimes herself. Nevertheless, after the shootout, Edgar Hoover faced a public relations challenge. Federal agents had killed a 62-year-old mother in a hail of bullets. To justify the outcome and protect the reputation of the young bureau, Hoover and his publicists crafted a powerful legend. Ma Barker was portrayed as the vicious criminal mastermind behind the entire Barker-Karpis gang, a ruthless queen of the underworld who directed her sons with iron control. This narrative transformed her into Bloody Mama, the monstrous figure that captured the American imagination through newspapers, books, films, and songs. The contrast between the official legend and the quieter reality persisted for years. Historians and researchers have repeatedly noted the absence of any concrete evidence linking Ma Barker directly to the planning or commission of the gang's crimes. She traveled with her sons and helped them in logistical ways, but she appears to have functioned more as a maternal figure than a strategic leader. The gang's real operational brains were widely regarded as belonging to Barker-Karpis and, to a lesser extent, the more violent Barker brothers themselves. The prolonged siege at Lake Weir lasted roughly 4 to 6 hours and remains one of the longest recorded gun battles in the history of the FBI. Estimates of the total rounds fired range from 950 to well over 1,500. Fred Barker's tactic of racing between windows and firing rapidly succeeded for a time in convincing the agents that a much larger force defended the house. In the end, however, the superior firepower, training, and persistence of the federal team prevailed. The deaths of Fred and Ma Barker effectively dismantled a major branch of the Barker-Karpis gang. Barker-Karpis remained at large for more than a year afterward, before his eventual capture in 1936. The other Barker brothers met their own violent ends in the following years. The shootout at the modest house on Lake Weir became a defining moment in the Public Enemy era, symbolizing both the ruthlessness of Depression-era gangsters and the growing determination of federal law enforcement to bring them down. Today, the site near Ocklawaha, Florida, still draws visitors interested in this dramatic chapter of American crime history. The story of Ma Barker continues to fascinate because it sits at the intersection of myth and reality. Was she a cold-hearted criminal mastermind who deserved her fate, or simply a mother caught in the deadly crossfire of her son's choices? The bullets that ended the siege at Lake Weir silenced the guns but left the debate unresolved. The Barker-Karpis gang exemplified the extreme violence and audacity of 1930s Midwest crime. Their bank robberies left trails of gunfire and death. Their kidnappings targeted wealthy businessmen and even the family of a major political supporter, drawing the personal attention of President Roosevelt and escalating the federal response. The gang's willingness to engage in prolonged chaotic shootouts with law enforcement set them apart even among the notorious outlaws of the period. Fred Barker's final stand demonstrated both desperation and tactical ingenuity. By constantly shifting positions and weapons, he maximized the psychological impact of his defense. The dense Florida trees and the heavy wooden construction of the house created a complex ballistic environment. Rifle rounds could penetrate walls that stopped pistol and submachine gun fire, giving the agents a critical advantage once they identified firing positions. The decision to send the caretaker inside reflected the agent's caution after hours of uncertainty. With ammunition running low and the possibility of reinforcements arriving for the gang, ending the standoff without further risk to federal personnel became paramount. The discovery of only 2 bodies upstairs confirmed that the fierce resistance had come almost entirely from Fred Barker, with Ma Barker present but apparently not actively shooting. In the aftermath, the Bureau carefully shaped the public narrative. Photographs of the bullet-riddled house circulated widely. Stories emphasized the discovery of weapons near both bodies and highlighted the gang's long list of crimes. The legend of Ma Barker as the most vicious, dangerous, and resourceful criminal brain of the decade took root and endured in popular culture. Films, books, and television productions continued to portray her as a gun-toting matriarch who ruled her criminal family with ruthless authority. Yet a growing body of historical research has pushed back against this image. Contemporary witnesses, including former gang associates, described Ma as a harmless, old-fashioned woman who cooked, kept house, and asked few questions about her son's activities. She enjoyed movies and the material comforts provided by the gang's proceeds, but showed little interest or aptitude for criminal strategy. The absence of any prior criminal charges against her, combined with the lack of documented evidence of her directing operations, supports the view that her legendary status was largely a post-mortem creation designed to justify the violent end of the siege. The Ma Barker case thus serves as a compelling study in the power of myth-making during a turbulent era. Law enforcement needed heroes and villains to rally public support for a stronger federal role in fighting crime. The press needed sensational stories to sell newspapers. Hollywood needed larger-than-life characters to fill movie screens. In this environment, the quiet reality of a 62-year-old mother who simply stayed close to her outlaw sons became overshadowed by the dramatic tale of a criminal queen brought down in a hail of bullets. The house on Lake Weir still stands as a quiet reminder of that dramatic day. Bullet holes were patched, but the memory of the longest shootout in early FBI history lingers. Visitors can imagine the crack of rifles, the rattle of Tommy guns, and the long hours of tension as agents and outlaws faced each other across a narrow stretch of Florida countryside. The event marked the beginning of the end for one of the most notorious criminal networks of the Depression. It also highlighted the evolving tactics of federal agents who were learning to confront well-armed, mobile gangs willing to fight to the death. Ultimately, the story of the Ma Barker massacre reveals the complexity hidden beneath sensational headlines. It shows how a single violent afternoon could transform an ordinary mother into a legendary figure whose name still evokes images of gangster malls and Tommy guns. Whether viewed as a ruthless mastermind or an innocent bystander caught in her son's deadly world, Kate Barker remains one of the most enduring and debated characters from America's Public Enemy era. The gunfight at Lake Weir closed one chapter in the war against organized crime in the 1930s. It demonstrated both the ferocity of the outlaws and the growing reach and resolve of federal law enforcement. As the smoke cleared and the bodies were removed, the nation moved on to new headlines and new outlaws. Yet the questions raised that day about justice, myth, and the true nature of criminal leadership continue to echo through history. Thanks for watching. That's it. That's all. Barber Skinny. I'm out.